1. The council chamber on Nexus Prime had witnessed countless debates over its 1,000-year history, but few as routine as the trade dispute session on the morning everything changed. Ambassador Zara of the Velix delegation sat in her appointed seat, her crystalline features reflecting the soft blue light of the chamber's bioluminescent walls. She had served the Galactic Council for 200 years without a single war under her mediation, a record she took quiet pride in. Her species had evolved as natural diplomats, their empathic abilities making them ideally suited to understanding the nuances of interspecies negotiation. She was reviewing a tariff proposal when the emergency alerts flooded the chamber's communication systems. High Commander Vexter of the Kroan Empire rose from his delegation section, his armored carapace gleaming under the chamber lights. Around him, representatives from 11 other species stood in coordinated synchronization. The Sovereign Alliance, as they called themselves, represented 40% of the Council's total military power. Zara felt a familiar unease ripple through her empathic senses. Something was very wrong. Esteemed Council, Vexter began, his voice carrying the resonant confidence of someone who believed himself untouchable. The Sovereign Alliance has this day secured 3 human colony worlds and successfully disabled Earth's orbital defense grid. This action was necessary to address a long-standing inefficiency in galactic resource allocation. The chamber erupted. Zara's internal organs seemed to crystallize with shock. Humans controlled 47% of known rare earth element deposits despite comprising only 3% of the galactic population. This was true. It was also true that humans had discovered most of those deposits themselves through extensive survey operations. The Alliance's argument about efficiency was at best a thin rationalization for what amounted to unprovoked military aggression. Vexter continued, displaying holographic projections of their military analysis. Our projections indicate human leadership will seek diplomatic resolution within 2 to 3 weeks. We propose joint administration of human resource worlds with equitable distribution protocols to be determined by council vote. Zara's attention shifted to the human delegation. Ambassador Chinwei sat perfectly still, his elderly face unreadable. She had worked with Chin for decades. He was patient, thoughtful, perpetually calm, even in heated debates. She had once watched him mediate a 12-hour negotiation without once raising his voice or showing frustration. His stillness now was different. It reminded her of something she had once witnessed on a nature preserve, a predator going perfectly motionless before the strike. The chamber's noise died as Chin rose to his feet. He moved with the careful deliberation of his 70 years, but there was something in his bearing that silenced even Vexter's triumphant posturing. "High Commander," Chin said quietly. "You have 24 hours to withdraw all forces from human territories and restore full sovereignty. This is your only warning." Vexter's mandibles spread in what passed for a Kroan smile. "Or what, Ambassador? You'll file a protest? Deploy your lawyers? We control your orbital space, we occupy your colonies. The military action is complete. We have already won." Chin looked at Vexter for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made Zara's empathic senses recoil. It wasn't anger she could have understood and mediated. This was something else. Something like sorrow mixed with resignation. "We have tried to explain for 3 centuries, Chin said. "We have been patient. We have been diplomatic. We have told you in every way we know how what we are capable of when pushed beyond certain limits. You have never listened. Now you will learn why we stopped having world wars." The human delegation walked toward the chamber exits. Zara watched Chin pause at the doorway, turning back to look at the assembled council. For just a moment, his careful diplomatic mask slipped, and she glimpsed something that terrified her, not rage, but a profound sadness, as if he were mourning something not yet dead. "We really tried to be better," he said softly. "Remember that we tried." Then the humans were gone, and the chamber exploded into debate. Zara immediately initiated diplomatic protocols, reaching out through every back channel she had cultivated over 2 centuries of service. Her contacts within the human delegation responded with identical messages delivered in voices stripped of all warmth: "Withdraw within 24 hours. This is not a negotiation." The Alliance was celebrating. Their military commanders reported minimal resistance during the initial occupation. Human colonies had seemed unprepared, their defense forces scattered and disorganized. Vexter gave interviews to Galactic news networks, positioning the action as a necessary correction to resource inequity. He was already framing himself as a reformer, someone willing to make hard choices for the greater good. Zara found herself unable to share in anyone's certainty. She returned to her private quarters and did something she had never done before. She accessed the Human Cultural Database and began reading their history in earnest. Most species kept their historical archives public as a matter of diplomatic transparency. Humans were no exception. The information was there for anyone willing to look. Almost no one ever did. What she found chilled her crystalline blood. Humanity had achieved nuclear fission in the year 1945 by their calendar. Within months, they had used atomic weapons in warfare twice. The descriptions of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were clinical in the database, but even clinical language could not hide the horror. Entire cities erased in moments. Generations scarred by radiation. A power that could end civilization unleashed while humanity was still confined to a single planet. And then something extraordinary. They stopped. They built more weapons, thousands of them, powerful enough to sterilize their entire world dozens of times over. They lived under the threat of extinction for decades. 2 major powers locked in what they called the Cold War, each capable of annihilating the other, each knowing that any attack would result in mutual destruction. They had a term for it: mutually assured destruction. Mad. They had literally gone mad with the power to end themselves. And somehow, impossibly, they had survived it. Zara found military documents declassified centuries ago. War plans with names like SIOP, Single Integrated Operational Plan. Protocols for launching civilization-ending retaliation within minutes of detecting an attack. Doomsday scenarios where automated systems would ensure mutual destruction even if all human leadership was killed in a first strike. They had looked into the abyss of their own extinction and built doctrines around dancing on its edge. Then she found the Third World War records. A brief, devastating conflict in the year 2077 that had pushed humanity to the brink before cooler heads prevailed. The casualties had been enormous. Nearly 500 million dead in 6 weeks. Strategic bombing had reduced major cities to rubble. Biological weapons had been deployed before both sides, horrified at what they had unleashed, agreed to an immediate ceasefire. And then again, they had stopped. They had established the Terran Unity government dedicated to ensuring humanity never again tore itself apart. They had achieved space travel, reached for the stars, and when they encountered other species, they had been diplomatic, patient, peaceful. Zara found a human military maxim embedded in their war college archives: "We don't want to fight like we used to, but we remember how, and we remember why we stopped." Never make us remember. The 24-hour deadline came and went. Alliance forces remained in place. Vexter publicly dismissed human threats as empty posturing. For 6 hours after the deadline, nothing happened. Galactic news networks began analyzing whether humanity had in fact been bluffing all along. Then the Alliance military networks exploded with emergency transmissions. Simultaneous precision strikes across all 12 Alliance homeworlds. Every military orbital station, every shipyard, every command and control center hit within a 15-minute window. The attacks were surgical. Kinetic projectiles traveling at significant fractions of light speed, nearly impossible to detect or intercept until impact. Civilian casualties were remarkably low. Military capacity was reduced by 60% in under an hour. Zara watched the tactical displays in horror, her empathic abilities overwhelmed by the collective shock reverberating through the council chamber. The precision was impossible. The coordination was impossible. The humans shouldn't have been able to execute such an operation. Their fleets were supposedly days away from Alliance space. Their military doctrines supposedly defensive in nature. Then she understood. The humans had fired those projectiles days ago, maybe weeks ago. They had calculated the trajectories, accounted for orbital mechanics, predicted where every Alliance military asset would be when the weapons arrived. They had been wargaming this exact scenario, planning for it, preparing for it, possibly since before some Council species had achieved faster-than-light travel. The emergency Council session was chaos. Alliance representatives, their earlier confidence shattered, demanded intervention. Some species called for peacekeeper deployment. Others urged caution. The human representative appeared via hologram. Not Ambassador Chen. This was someone new. Admiral Aonquo wore a military uniform. Her dark face was set in an expression of absolute professionalism. She did not sit. She stood at rigid attention. The Sovereign Alliance has 48 hours to complete full withdrawal from all human territories and pay appropriate reparations, she stated. This is your second and final warning. Vexter, recovering some of his composure, leaned forward. You have revealed your capabilities, Admiral. You cannot sustain simultaneous operations across 12 systems. We have reserve fleets, reserve resources. This was an impressive strike, but strategically you are still thinking in terms of conventional warfare. Aonquo interrupted. That is your second mistake. Your first was attacking us in the first place. She paused, and Zara felt something shift in the chamber's atmosphere. When Aonquo continued, her voice carried the weight of inevitability. For 300 years, we have operated under peacetime protocols. Those protocols are designed to prevent what we are capable of. You have now triggered our wartime protocols, specifically Protocol Omega-7, which we established after the Third World War. What does that entail? Zara heard herself ask. Aonquo's eyes met hers through the hologram. It means we have stopped pretending we evolved past our nature. It means we have gone nuclear. And it means that every weapon system we shelved as too inhumane for civilized warfare is now active and authorized for deployment. The hologram ended. Zara accessed the human military database again, searching for Protocol Omega-7. It was there, publicly available, written in the code language of military doctrine. In the event of existential threat to human sovereignty or survival, all conventional rules of engagement are suspended. Objective: ensure that if humanity falls, the threat falls with it. There is no proportional response. There is only total victory or mutually assured annihilation. The protocol was 300 years old. Humanity had written it during the formation of their unified government, a covenant with themselves about what they would do if ever pushed to the brink again. And they had made it public, had told the entire galaxy exactly what would happen if anyone threatened their existence. No one had believed them. Why would they? Humans had been so peaceful, so diplomatic. Surely the protocol was vestigial, a historical artifact from their more primitive days. The Alliance leadership convened an emergency war council. Zara attended as council mediator, her empathic senses reeling from the waves of fear and defiance clashing in the chamber. High Commander Vexter argued for continued resistance. They had been surprised once. It would not happen again. The Alliance possessed numerical superiority. They would mobilize reserve fleets and demonstrate proper military dominance. 36 hours into the 48-hour deadline, Alliance Second Fleet, 400 warships representing significant military investment, moved toward human space as a show of force. The fleet disappeared from all sensors. 6 hours later, debris fields were located. The ships had been hit by relativistic kinetic missiles, accelerated to such high speeds that shields and armor meant nothing. The projectiles had been fired days earlier, their trajectories calculated with impossible precision to intercept a fleet whose deployment orders had only been issued hours before impact. Alliance intelligence officers came to a terrifying realization. Humans had been predicting their responses, wargaming every scenario for decades, perhaps for centuries. Every contingency, every tactical option, every strategic response, humans had already planned for it, calculated the counters, prepared the weapons. Zara sought out human civilians, hoping to understand what was happening through perspectives outside the military chain of command. She contacted Dr. Sarah Ackerley, a human historian specializing in military history. The woman agreed to speak with her via a secure channel. "We have been a spacefaring species for 400 years, Ambassador," Dr. Ackerley explained, her elderly face weary. "Do you know what we did for the first 50 of those years? We wargamed every scenario, every threat. We built weapon systems and immediately classified them as never use unless extinction-level threat. We have had contingency plans for this exact scenario since before your species achieved fusion power." "But why?" Zara asked, her empathic abilities picking up a complex mixture of pride and shame from the historian. "Why prepare so extensively for war while preaching peace?" "Because we know what we are, Ambassador. We are the species that almost sterilized our own planet 3 separate times. We climbed out of that darkness and swore never again. But never again does not mean we forgot how. It means we got better at it and locked it away. The Alliance just broke the lock. The 48-hour deadline passed. Alliance leadership, despite everything, refused to withdraw. Vexter believed humans were bluffing about further escalation. He had to believe it. The alternative was admitting that his actions had doomed billions. Zara received an urgent summons to HumanPrime, the Alliance military headquarters world. She arrived to find the planet under siege, but unlike any siege in galactic history. Human fleets surrounded the world at extreme range, not blockading in the traditional sense, but controlling all approaches. Every ship attempting to leave was disabled, not destroyed, and left drifting. Every supply convoy was intercepted, but no shots were fired at the planet itself. Vexter remained defiant in his underground command center. "They will not attack a civilian population. They are too moral for that. We can outlast them." "Then why are you not attempting to break the siege?" Zara asked. The truth emerged slowly, pieced together from frightened junior officers. 3 Alliance fleets had attempted to break the siege. All had been annihilated with 0 human casualties. Human tactics were incomprehensible. Perfect coordination across vast distances. Weapons that seemed to predict enemy movements. Cyber warfare that turned Alliance ships against each other. Their quantum encryption, thought unbreakable, had been compromised. Their tactical communications, supposedly secure, had been intercepted and analyzed in real time. Zara requested permission to contact the human fleet. Admiral Aonquo appeared on the holographic display, and Zara was struck by how exhausted she looked. This was not a warrior exulting in victory. This was someone carrying an enormous burden. Admiral, the Alliance leadership is requesting terms. They wish to negotiate a ceasefire. The terms were stated, Aonquo replied. Full withdrawal, full reparations. They have 12 hours remaining on their extended grace period. And if they refuse? The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer, almost gentle. Ambassador, I like you. You have always treated us with respect. So, I am going to tell you something off the record. I do not want to do what comes next. None of us do. We have been fighting for 6 days. And we have adhered to rules of engagement that our ancestors would consider suicidally restrictive. We have minimized civilian casualties. We have disabled rather than destroyed when possible. We have been humane. But if that deadline passes, Protocol Omega-7 proceeds to Phase 2. What is Phase 2? Phase 2 does not distinguish between military and civilian infrastructure. Phase 2 is what we did to ourselves in the Third World War before we learned better. This strategic bombing, unrestricted warfare, everything we swore we would never do again. Zara felt her crystalline structure resonate with horror. You would kill billions of civilians. No, Ambassador. We will give them 6 hours to evacuate major population centers, but then we will destroy every power plant, every water treatment facility, every piece of infrastructure that makes modern civilization possible. We will send them back to pre-industrial technology levels. We will do it to all 12 Alliance homeworlds simultaneously. That is genocide. Aonquo's expression hardened. No, genocide is what the Alliance attempted when they attacked our colonies with intent to subjugate us. This is war. Real war. The kind we stopped fighting 300 years ago. The kind your species never had to fight because you achieved space travel before developing weapons of mass destruction. You do not understand what total war means because you have never had to wage it. She leaned forward, and Zara saw something ancient and terrible in the human's eyes. We call it going nuclear, Ambassador, not because of the weapons. Those are crude compared to what we have now. We call it that because it is the moment when you stop caring about tomorrow and focus only on surviving today. It is the moment when mutually assured destruction becomes not a deterrent but an acceptable outcome. It is the moment when you decide that if you must fall, you will drag your enemy down with you because dying alone is unacceptable. The council session that followed was the most divisive in galactic history. Representatives shouted over each other. Alliances fractured. Threats were made. Some species wanted to intervene militarily against humanity. Others wanted to quarantine both sides and let them destroy each other. A pragmatic minority recognized that humans were demonstrating remarkable restraint and that the Alliance had brought this upon themselves. Councillor Tvex, representing a species that had fought humans 200 years earlier in a brief border war, finally managed to be heard over the chaos. I tried to warn you. We fought humans once. They defeated us in 11 days, then immediately offered generous peace terms. We asked them why. Why stop when they had us beaten? Their commanders said, because we do not want to show you what we do to enemies who will not surrender. We thought it was bravado. It was not. The holographic display showing Vexter suddenly cut out. Reports flooded in. HumanPrime had gone dark. All orbital infrastructure had been destroyed in a coordinated strike. Admiral Aonquo's voice filled the council chamber. Phase 2 has commenced. Alliance populations have been given evacuation warnings. Strategic infrastructure strikes will begin in 4 hours. To all Council species, this is an internal matter between humanity and the Sovereign Alliance. Any intervention will be considered an act of war against humanity. We do not want more enemies, but we will not stop until the Alliance withdraws and surrenders. Zara watched tactical displays showing human fleets moving into position above all 12 Alliance homeworlds. The coordination was perfect. The timing was synchronized. Humans were not improvising. They were executing a plan finalized decades ago, perhaps longer. Every contingency had been anticipated. Every counter-strategy had been prepared for. This was not the fog of war. This was the cold clarity of a species that had spent centuries thinking about how to fight wars they hoped never to fight. She volunteered to oversee humanitarian evacuation efforts. Unable to simply observe anymore, she arrived at HumanPrime to find absolute chaos. The orbital defenses were gone. All satellites destroyed, but the surface remained untouched. Massive human transport ships appeared. Not warships, but vessels designed for moving large populations. Admiral Aonquo's message broadcast across all frequencies: "We are providing 4 hours for evacuation of major population centers. Human transport vessels will assist." After 4 hours, strategic strikes commence. Vexter, from his underground bunker, screamed that it was a trick. The humans wanted populations vulnerable, exposed. They would slaughter civilians in the open. Aonquo's response was cold. "Commander, we could have glassed your planet from orbit 6 days ago. If we wanted you dead, you would be dead. This is about capability, not genocide. Evacuate your cities." Zara watched something that defied everything she thought she understood about warfare. Human ships coordinated with Alliance ground forces to evacuate civilians. Human soldiers helped injured Alliance citizens into transport vessels. Human medics treated enemy wounded. She found herself aboard a human transport commanded by Commander Rodriguez, a young officer who could not have been more than 40. "Why are you helping evacuate people you are about to make homeless?" she asked him. Rodriguez looked at her, and she saw the same weariness she had seen in Admiral Aonquo. "Because they are not our enemy, Ambassador, their government is. We have a saying: destroy the warrior's sword, not the warrior's children. We are about to destroy their civilization's infrastructure, but we are going to make sure as few civilians die as possible. Even though they attacked us first. Especially because they attacked us first," he continued. "We need to show the galaxy who we are when we fight. Not monsters. Just extremely good at warfare. There is a difference." The 4-hour mark arrived. Zara watched from a human command vessel as the fleets opened fire. Precision strikes rained down on HumanPrime: power generation facilities, industrial complexes, military command centers, communication hubs. No nuclear weapons, no biological agents, just kinetic strikes and directed energy weapons. Each target carefully selected to maximize infrastructure damage while minimizing casualties. Within 2 hours, HumanPrime's infrastructure was reduced to pre-industrial levels. The lights went out across the planet. Manufacturing ceased. Modern civilization stopped, but the civilian casualties, given the scale of the bombardment, were remarkably low. Under 100,000 dead on a world of 11 billion, a tragedy, but a fraction of what it could have been. The same scene played out across all 12 Alliance homeworlds simultaneously. The Alliance command structure collapsed. High Commander Vexter went silent, rumored to have fled to a secret bunker, abandoning his people. The remaining Alliance leadership, scattered and broken, reached out desperately for mediation. Admiral Chen contacted Zara. He was back in uniform. Apparently, the elderly ambassador had been a reserve admiral all along. How many of the human diplomats had been military officers? She wondered. How long had they been preparing for this? Ambassador Zara, we need your help, Chen said. The alliance is broken, but they have not formally surrendered. We need someone they trust to mediate terms. Why? She asked. You have one. You can dictate any terms you want. Because we do not want to rule them. We do not want an empire. We just want to be left alone. But we need formal surrender before we can stop. Protocol Omega-7 is clear. Either they surrender, or we continue until they are incapable of ever threatening us again. We would prefer surrender. Zara agreed to mediate. She met with the Alliance Council in a neutral location. Vexter refused to participate, still clinging to delusions of continued resistance from his bunker. The Alliance leaders were devastated. Some remained defiant. Most were terrified. All were confused. Chancellor Mvira of the Dacian hegemony spoke for the group. We do not understand. You could exterminate us. Why negotiate at all? Chen looked at the assembled leaders with something like pity. Because this was never about extermination. It was about survival. You threatened our existence. We responded with overwhelming force to ensure you would never threaten us again. But now that you understand what we are capable of, we can return to civilization. You call this civilization? Mvira's voice cracked. You have destroyed 12 worlds. We have destroyed 12 worlds in infrastructure, Chen corrected gently. Your populations are intact. You can rebuild. It will take generations, but you will recover. And perhaps you will remember this lesson. Humanity tried diplomacy for 3 centuries. We were patient. We were reasonable. We were peaceful. But we were never weak. And we never forgot what we are capable of when pushed too far. The surrender terms were surprisingly lenient. Full withdrawal from human territories. Modest reparations. Humans had no interest in crippling Alliance economies. Public acknowledgement that the Alliance had initiated hostilities. A 100-year non-aggression pact with inspection provisions. Alliance leaders who had ordered the attack would stand trial in human courts, but with council observers to ensure fairness. The Alliance signed. They had no choice, but the terms could have been far worse. Within 6 hours, all human forces withdrew from Alliance space. The war had lasted 14 days. Alliance casualties numbered approximately 2 million, mostly military. Human casualties, mostly from the initial Alliance attacks on colonies, were around 300,000. Infrastructure damage to the Alliance would require 2 centuries of rebuilding. The galaxy was in shock. 1 week after the surrender, Admiral Aeon Quo addressed the full Galactic Council. She still wore her uniform, still looked exhausted. Zara wondered if the Admiral had slept at all since the war began. We did not want this war, Aeon Quo said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. We tried for 3 centuries to show you we were peaceful. We thought if we were patient enough, diplomatic enough, restrained enough, you would see us as partners instead of threats. We were wrong. The Sovereign Alliance saw our restraint as weakness. They calculated that we would not or could not respond with sufficient force. They were wrong, too. So now the galaxy knows what we are. We are the species that almost destroyed itself and learned from it. We are the species that developed weapons capable of exterminating all life on a planet, then chose to lock them away. We are the species that will always choose peace first. She paused, and the chamber held its breath. But we are also the species that will go nuclear. Completely, utterly nuclear, if you threaten our survival. We call it going nuclear not because of the weapons, but because of the mindset. It is the moment when survival becomes the only objective and all other considerations, mercy, proportion, tomorrow, become secondary. It is the moment when mutually assured destruction stops being a nightmare and becomes just the price of survival. For 300 years, we have been telling you, do not make us remember what we are. Do not make us go back to what we were. Do not push us to the point where we stop thinking about building a better future and start thinking only about surviving today. The Alliance pushed us there. You all just witnessed what happens when humanity stops pretending we have evolved past our nature. Aeon Quo looked around the chamber, making eye contact with representatives from dozens of species. We are going to return to being peaceful now. We are going to rebuild our colonies. We are going to help the Alliance rebuild. Yes, help them, because that is who we want to be. We are going to go back to being the patient, diplomatic species you thought was weak. But now you know. Now you all know we are not weak. We are just very, very careful about when we stop being civilized. Do not make us remember again. The Admiral left, and the council chamber remained silent for nearly an hour. No one seemed to know what to say. The fundamental assumptions underlying galactic politics had shifted. Humanity had always been powerful. They had just hidden that power behind centuries of diplomatic patience. Now the mask was off. Zara spent weeks preparing her formal report. She interviewed survivors, reviewed tactical data, consulted with military analysts from a dozen species. Everyone reached the same conclusion. Humanity had been capable of this level of warfare for centuries. They had simply chosen not to demonstrate it. Their peaceful diplomacy had not been weakness. It had been a choice. A choice they could unmake when survival demanded it. She met with Ambassador Chen one final time before submitting her report. He had returned to civilian clothes, back to his role as patient diplomat. They sat in a quiet garden on Nexus Prime, surrounded by flowering plants from 100 worlds. "Will they ever forget?" she asked him. Chen looked sad. "I hope not. Because if they forget, we might have to remind them. And next time, we might not be able to pull back from the edge as easily." "Your people frighten me, Ambassador." "Good," he said. "We frighten ourselves. That is why we are so careful about when we let that part of us out." He was quiet for a moment. "We have a saying from our old wars, walk softly and carry a big stick. For 3 centuries, we have been walking softly. You just saw the stick. Let us hope the galaxy's memory is long enough that we can go back to walking softly." Zara's final report to the Council included a formal recommendation: humanity should be classified as an apex predator species, not because of their technology, but because of their psychology. They are capable of extreme violence but choose restraint. This makes them more dangerous, not less, because when they do choose violence, they execute it with the efficiency of a species that has survived despite and because of their own destructive capacity. Recommendation: never threaten human survival. They will always choose to drag their enemy down with them rather than die alone. 1 year later, the galaxy had settled into a new equilibrium. Alliance worlds were rebuilding, aided by quiet human technical assistance that was never publicly acknowledged. Human colonies had recovered and were thriving. The Galactic Council had proposed giving humanity veto power over military actions, which humans immediately declined. "We do not want to rule," their representative said. "We just want mutual respect." In a military academy on Earth, Admiral Aeon Quo taught a class of young officers. The memorial wall behind her bore the names of every human who had died in the Alliance War. At the top, engraved in letters that caught the light, was a simple phrase, "Never again. Unless we must." "What did we learn from the Alliance War?" she asked her students. A young cadet raised her hand. "That we can win any war." "No," Aonquo said firmly. "We learned that winning the war is the easy part. Going back to peace afterward, that is the hard part. That is what makes us human instead of monsters." She gestured to the memorial wall. "We went nuclear. We did what we swore we would never do again. We won. But look at the cost. Not to them. To us. To our souls. The galaxy learned to fear us. But we learned something, too. Every time we go nuclear, every time we let that darkness out, it gets a little harder to put it back. So the real victory is not that we won. It is that we stopped." The students absorbed this in silence. They were young, born after the war, but they understood. Every human understood at some deep level what they were capable of. It was the burden there. 5. Species carried the knowledge of what they had done to themselves, what they could do to others, and the constant choice to be better than their worst instincts. Somewhere in the galaxy, other species were making similar choices, learning from humanity's example, recognizing that true strength lay not in the capacity for violence, but in the wisdom to restrain it. And in the council chambers on Nexus Prime, Ambassador Zara filed her daily report, monitoring galactic peace with the vigilance of someone who had seen what happened when that peace broke. She thought often of Admiral Aonquo's words, "Do not make us remember again." The galaxy would not forget, could not forget. Because humanity had shown them something terrifying and profound, that the most dangerous species was not the one that chose violence first, but the one that chose peace first and violence only when all other options were exhausted. That species would fight with the accumulated wisdom of all the times they had chosen not to fight, all the weapons they had designed and shelved, all the scenarios they had planned for and prayed never to execute. Humanity had gone nuclear, and then, impossibly, they had come back. That was the real miracle. That was the real lesson. Not that they could destroy, but that they could stop destroying. Not that they could wage total war, but that they could choose not to. The galaxy had learned. And in learning, perhaps they had all become a little more civilized, a little more careful, a little more aware of the lines that should never be crossed. Because now they all knew what waited on the other side of those lines. Now they had all seen what going nuclear really meant. And none of them ever wanted to see it again.